All right, let's get into this 30, 60, 90 video. The 30, 60, 90 is the second one of our special right triangles. It is a perfect half of a rectangle, diagonal half of a rectangle. Once again, I got some radical problems over here on the left I want to go ahead and take care of real quick. So 6 times radical 3. I've talked about like terms. 6 times radical 3 is like 6 times x. Radical 3 is different than a whole number. So the outcome here would just be 6 radical 3. Okay, radical 2 times radical 3, that is like terms. All right, so we are going to multiply those to make radical 6. Now radical 6, now we think about the numbers we can break down. We can break down 4 because it's 2 times 2. 6 is not a whole number times itself. So actually, square root of radical 6, you cannot break down. So that's actually the final answer. But let's look at the other one. 3 times 3 are like terms. That can be broken down because 9 is 3 times 3. So we do take the square root of 9 because it will give us a whole number. So the final answer to that third one's 3. All right, on this next one, we got 6 radical 3 times radical 3. So I'm going to multiply the like terms. All right, so that's 6 times radical 9, but we know already that radical 9 turns into 3. So this becomes actually 6 times 3 is 18. That's your final answer there. And 6 radical 3 divided by radical 3, if you have something, the same exact thing on opposite sides of the fraction bar, they cancel out. And this answer would be 6. All right, now, the 30, 60, 90 is a little more challenging than the 45, 45, 90. The reason why that is because the 30, 60, 90 does not have 2 congruent sides. It doesn't have 2 congruent angles either. So when you look at a 30, 60, 90, you're going to look at a short leg, or sometimes, a lot of the times actually, I refer to this to as a little leg. And sometimes the longer leg I refer to as the big leg. So know that the short leg, I can call it little leg. The longer leg, I could call it bigger leg or big leg. So there's 2 ways to get the short leg. The short leg can be found by taking half of the hypo. So whatever the hypo is divided by 2. Or take your big leg or long leg divided by radical 3. The long leg divided by radical 3, or the big leg divided by radical 3. The longer leg is found by multiplying it by multiplying the little leg. Let me go ahead and erase this real quick. Multiplying the little leg by radical 3. Yeah, I'm trying to type with a stylus. And the hypo is found by saying little leg times 2. It's twice as big as the little leg. All right, so let's go ahead and use those formulas. Remember, if I'm going fast, you can pause and rewind. All right, number 4. Take a look at this. What they give us a little leg. Okay, x is the big leg. The math at the top of the screen says x is found by taking little leg times radical 3. It's 5 radical 3. That's your big leg. You can't do anything else with that because they'll give you a decimal, and I'm not going to accept any decimals. Now the hypo is across from the right angle. That's twice as big as the little leg. So that is 10. 5 times 2. So let's do it again with the little leg. 14, here's the big leg. It's times radical 3. It's just 14 radical 3. You leave it like that because it turns into a decimal. And then to get the hypo, multiply it by 2. All right. So on number 6 here, they start with something new. They start with the hypo. Okay? We have to go hypo to little leg or shorter leg first. Have to. And it's half the size. Well, we were here. We times it by 2 to get the hypo. Now we divide it by 2 to get the little leg. So the little leg is 16. Now to get the big leg, times it by radical 3. I'm using those. That is supposed to be a 3. I'm using those formulas we wrote down up here. Hopefully you wrote it down. What happened? Okay. All right, number 7. We're going to start with a hypo again. So hypo goes to little leg by dividing it by 2. And then we go to big leg by multiplying by radical 3. There you go. All right, so now let's take a look at 2. We start with the big leg. If you have a radical 3 out here, it's a little weird. So look at 8, radical 3. Look at number 9, 9 radical 3. It's a little weird. You always have a number in front of the radical. Remember x? Remember what coefficients are. If x doesn't have a 1 in front of it, what would the coefficient be? It would be 1. So our coefficient here is 1. So big leg to little leg is divide by radical 3. So check this out. 1 radical 3 divided by radical 3. What is the little leg? The little leg is, those cancel out, the little leg's 1. How do you get the hypo? Multiply it by 2. 1 times 2, done. Let's do it again. 9 radical 3. That's the big leg. How do you get to the little leg? Is you divide it by radical 3. So what is the little leg now? 9. Now, how do you get the hypo? Double it. So there is 2 examples of each on the 30, 60, 90 on where you're starting. There, we started with the little leg here and here. We started with the hypo on 6 and 7. Then we started with the big leg on 8 and 9. So here is one of our, remember in the 45, 45, 90, there's a special little trick I put for you? Well, in the big leg, there's also a little shortcut trick that I'm going to show you. And it's right here. When the big leg is a whole number, Yoda says, do this, you will. When the big leg is a whole number, your formula to get the little leg is to divide it by 3 now. Because the 30, 60, 90, that's divisible by 3. And give it a radical 3. That is what you do when you're given a whole number as a big leg. So let's check out how we get the little leg. So here's my big leg. It's across from the 60. It is our little legs there. So how do I get it? As I put it in this formula, 6 divided by 3 times radical 3. Our little leg is 2 radical 3. Now, how do you get the hypo? The hypo is twice as big. So take a look at this. So here is my little leg, 2 radical 3. How do I multiply that by 2? 2 radical 3 times, whoops, 2 radical 3 times 2. Now, what's 2 radical 3 times 2? These are whole numbers. They're like terms. I'll make it into a 4. And then put the radical 3 behind it. That is your hypo. Let's do it again. Here's a big leg because it's across from the 60. Is the 21. It's a whole number. How do I get it? The little leg divided by 3, give it a radical 3. This is now going to be 7 radical 3. I use this formula here, or that formula right above it. Divided by 3, give it a radical 3. Now, 7 radical 3 to get the hypo, because it's across in the right angle, is double it. So the hypo is double this times it by 2. The hypo will be 14 radical 3. All right, so what I'm going to do is show you some examples. And I'm going to pause. I want you to pause the video and try these. I'm going to give you 5 seconds, and I'm going to quickly go over them. Okay, so hopefully you had enough time to try these 6 problems, a mixed review. All right, so here I'm going at it. So number 10, this is one of our special cases. When the hypo on a 45/45/90 is a whole number, divided by 2, give it a radical 2. These are both 14 radical 2. The 45/45/90 gets a radical 2. The 30/60/90 gets a radical 3. 11, that's the hypo of a 30/60/90. The little leg is half. The big leg is little leg times radical 3. 12, the leg of a 45/45/90 are equal. So that has to be 4. The hypo is 4 times radical 2. 13, the little leg is 11. The hypo is twice the size. And the big leg is times radical 3. And 14, the big leg is 15 radical 3. To get the little leg, you divide it by radical 3. And they cancel off. The little leg's 15. The hypo is twice as big. 15, 45/45/90, the hypo is 9 radical 2. To get the leg, you need to divide it by radical 2. And both legs are 9. All right, so let me show you a couple more examples. I'm going to pause the video and try some of these. I'm going to go over these in a minute, in a couple seconds. Okay, so this is one of our special cases with the vidoe problem. If your big leg is a whole number divided by 3, give it a radical 3. So that's 2 radical 3. The hypo is times 2. So there is twice the size of little leg. This is another one of our weird problems. When the hypo is a whole number on the 45/45/90, divided by 2, give it a radical 2, and both of them are 5 radical 2. 18, 30/60/90, that's the hypo. 38, take half of that to get the little leg. The big leg is times it by radical 3. 19 radical 3. 19, I threw a little weird one at you here. That's a 45/45/90 with a radical 3. We haven't seen that yet. Well, I do know this is 3 radical 3. And I know the hypo is 3 radical 3 times radical 2. So you should know by now the like terms you multiply. And we've already talked about 6 being one of those weird numbers we cannot break down. 20. That's a hypo. I'm going to the little leg, give me 7. Going to the big leg, multiplying it by radical 3, and I'm done. 7 radical 3. 21 is another special case. Hypo is a whole number on a 45, 45, 90. Divide it by 2, give it a radical 2. That is the answer to both legs. All right, I guess I'll look at this last one here because this is something we haven't seen yet. So this is the last one I'll try. So hope you can pause this and give it a shot. But I'm going to go over it. So that's 4 radical 2 on a leg. This has got to be equal to it. That's not a hypo. That's the first time I think we've seen that on a hypo. 4 radical 2. Now, to get the hypo, we have to multiply it by radical 2. Well, it's already got a radical 2. I don't care. We still have to multiply it by radical 2. Anybody know what that turns out to be? That turns out to be 8. If you're not really sure how, ask me in class. Or these become the square root of 4. And you should know what to do with the square root of 4. And there is the special, or the 30, 60, 90 video.